Welcome to another edition of The Public Interest. My name is David Granger, and on this series of programs, we examine issues of interest to the Guyanese public, whether they be at home or in the diaspora. And today we look particularly at the question of disease. How many of you, my friends, know that for the first 10 months of this year, 18 persons have already died from dengue? How many of you know that every hour of the day or night, one person in Guyana gets infected with dengue or filaria or malaria? Every hour, a Guyanese is infected with one of these diseases, which we call vector-borne diseases. The mosquito, the small mosquito, is the most dangerous animal in Guyana because it causes more death than snakes, than jaguars, than caiman, anything else. The mosquito causes more deaths. And today we must examine the death and the disability and the discomfort caused by mosquitoes in these vector-borne diseases. One of the big problems is that vector-borne diseases affect the poorest and the most vulnerable members of the population. Those are, unfortunately, the main victims. Apart from impairing the health and reducing human productivity, some of these infections, some of these diseases could be fatal. Disease imposes a burden on the limited resources of the family, of the community, and of the country. Vector-borne diseases, or you can call it mosquito-borne diseases, as defined by the World Health Organization, are the human illnesses caused by parasites, viruses, and bacteria, which are transmitted to humans by vectors, usually mosquitoes. World Health Organization estimates that about 700,000 deaths worldwide are caused by vector-borne diseases. 700,000, almost the population of Guyana worldwide, is affected by death, well, killed by vector-borne diseases every year. Vector-borne diseases are a countrywide problem. No region is immune. But 4 regions, and listen carefully, 4 regions are particularly vulnerable. Those are Region 1, the Barima-Waini region, Region 7, Kuyuni-Mazuruni, Region 8, Putaro-Siparuni, and Region 9, the Rupununi. And those 4 regions are the most affected by vector-borne diseases. Malaria particularly. And many years ago, we thought that we had eradicated malaria under the work of that Italian Dr. Giglioli. Unfortunately, malaria has returned with a vengeance. And you can say now that malaria is endemic in Region 1, 7, 8, and 9. Those are our main hinterland regions. And those regions are responsible for as much as 90% of malaria infection, particularly in the gold mining areas. Many young people leave high school and they go into the gold fields. But a few months later, some of them return with fever, shivering, and they're suffering from malaria. It ought not to be in 2023. It ought not to be in a modern country. And we have to do something about it. And this program, The Public Interest, aims not at criticizing, but at looking forward to the future to see what could be done to save our young people, particularly from vector-borne diseases. They're a big public health threat, yes. And there were over 84,000 positive tests for malaria, 9,000 tests for dengue, and 120 cases of filaria between 2020 and 2023 under this administration. Guyana was among the countries in the Americas, in the Western Hemisphere, with the highest infection rate of malaria up to 2021. And Guyana's infection rate accounts for 3%. Now, we're not 3% of the population in the Western Hemisphere, but we account for 3% of all malaria cases every year. And we have also accounted for an increase in fatalities from these vector-borne diseases over the last 3 years. So you can see we have a big problem in our hands. We are all happy that we are getting more money from petroleum revenues, much more than we have ever gotten in previous decades and previous administrations. But the money must be spent to look after people. Yes, you can build a stadium, you can build a road, but who will use the stadium, who will use the road? But people, and people's health is important. The health is important. And when we speak of vector-borne diseases, there are several. I mentioned only malaria, filaria, and dengue, but we also have chikungunya. And this causes fever, it causes pain in the joints, it causes headaches and nausea, skin rashes. Dengue is the big killer right now. And dengue can cause blood vessel damage. It can cause liver enlargement, internal bleeding. Then we have filaria. Many people on the coastline are familiar with filaria, otherwise known as Bigfoot. Well, it is not only unsightly. Of course, it causes goody. It is also responsible for swelling in different parts of the body. So filaria is many of us have grown up hearing about filaria and Bigfoot and so on, but it's a dangerous disease. Malaria can cause the organs of the body to fail, and it can cause, sometimes people can go into coma, people can die because of malaria. And they said this year we've already had over 18 deaths. Zika, again, this is not very widespread, but it can cause rashes, it can cause fever, joint pain, eye infections. Worse still, pregnant women who are infected with the Zika virus risk producing babies with microcephaly, which means that the heads are small. And if your head's small, your brain's small. So from birth, they are at a disadvantage. Now, these vector-borne diseases, you can see, particularly the ones in Guyana, chikungunya, dengue, filaria, malaria, and Zika, are, in a way, the result of changes in the environment or changes in the temperature, the climate. Sometimes when there's excessive rainfall, what the hydromet calls precipitation, heavy rainfall, that's what it means. And it means that there's a likelihood that the places where these mosquitoes breed will be flooded and will produce more mosquitoes. And once you have more mosquitoes, there's a likelihood that the females particularly will go out looking for blood, because they need blood for the strength to produce more mosquitoes. So in fact, they get the blood from human beings to go out and kill human beings. That's what the mosquitoes do, the vectors do. And the main and most dangerous vectors are the Anopheles, the Aedes, and the Culex. And these are responsible for transmitting the diseases of malaria, yellow fever, dengue, chikungunya, and Zika. In fact, we had better get rid of all these disease-bearing mosquitoes because they are the ones that cause filaria. People think, long ago people used to think that you get filaria from walking in wet water, well, or you get yellow fever from dirty water. Water is where the mosquitoes breed, and we have to eliminate breeding pools where these mosquitoes proliferate. And we are the ones who are responsible for the practices which contribute to uh, these diseases. Because many of them, most vector-borne diseases are preventable. But when you have open borders, when you have migrants coming over by the thousands from Venezuela, they bring disease. This is what happened during COVID. This is what happened with malaria. When some areas were free of malaria, particularly gold mining areas, you had many miners, garimperos, and people from neighboring countries bringing the disease, and they infected mosquitoes, and the mosquitoes infected Guyanese. So when we thought we were getting rid of these diseases, we were being reinfected because of our own carelessness in not securing our borders. There's no point having policemen and soldiers cleaning up Mandela Avenue when they should be protecting our borders, preventing illegal and unregistered migrants from entering. And anyone who wants to enter Guyana must ensure that they pass the test for public health to make sure they're not bringing any virus or any other infections. So we couldn't be considered to be authors of our own destruction, in the sense that when you talk about backtrack, oh, it's very funny. Kind of the big backtrack is almost like a cottage industry. But when those people travel on backtrack, nobody could monitor their health. And when you have people coming into the country across the borders as illegal miners, when you have international air travel, when you have ships coming into the port, all of these are means of transmitting vector-borne diseases. And if we're not careful, if we do not put precautionary measures in place to prevent the entry of people who are infected with disease from entering from the country, then we are endangering the health of our own people. This is what the APNUAFC administration had to do during COVID. People felt we were a bit stringent, a bit draconic, a bit harsh, but we had to do this. Don't forget the first patient zero, in March 2020, actually was a remigrant who came into Guyana with the disease. And it is still happening along our border, particularly that western border with Brazil and Venezuela. Over 2,000 kilometers of border. And we can see that the country is in danger of being continuously reinfected with vector-borne diseases. We have to be careful. All of us have to be careful. Disease doesn't, only pick up poor people. It picks up big shots as well. It picks up children. And once we're all infected, well, it will affect our productivity and affect our health. So backtrack is not funny. Backtrack could be fatal. And smuggling is not funny. Contraband is not funny. It can affect our health. We have seen in the hinterland, and you've seen photographs. Quite recently, you saw the mining pits which were abandoned by a mining company. Huge pools of water in the ground where mosquitoes breed. And some people call it the Great Escape. People come into this country, dig a hole in the ground, they remove our gold, and then try to leave the country without paying their royalties. But worse than that, worse than escaping without paying the royalties, is the fact that they leave holes in the ground which breed mosquitoes. And this helps the cycle of transmission of disease to human beings. And recklessness in the mining industry particularly is a major contributor to creating these breeding sites for mosquitoes. And those mosquitoes transmit the malaria parasite. Then we have changes in land use. Many of the villages on coastal Guyana used to be plantations, and they had an elaborate system of canals. But when those when the sugar industry shrunk, and when those canals were not properly maintained, they became breeding grounds for mosquitoes. And I can tell you that some housing areas, you don't have the same degree of stewardship and maintenance as a sugar estate was required to have. Uh, we push villages into these areas. We look for economic resource exploitation. We want to go and look for new minerals in these areas, dig holes in the ground. And when you get the gold, people don't fill back the holes. They just disappear with the gold and spend it in foreign countries. Those holes are breeding sites for mosquitoes, and those mosquitoes introduce new infections um, in our country. That is where we're at. And whenever there's a flood, and we have floods every single year, um, in the notorious May-June period. Whenever there are floods, there will be heavy precipitation, that is heavy rainfall, and it means that there'll be more opportunities for mosquitoes to breed. There'll be more opportunities for environmental pollution, which will facilitate the growth of the mosquito population. When you see the reckless disposal, it's not a matter of beauty, the reckless disposal of single-use plastics and old tires and styrofoam food boxes after some event, coconut shells in the rivers. Then you see vehicles broken down at the roadside. When you see piles of garbage dumped to the roadside or dumped in canals and creeks, these are not only unsightly, they are dangerous because mosquitoes go into them when they see that the water is stagnant, and they breed the larvae, and the larvae become mosquitoes, and the mosquitoes affect your children. That is the problem. That is why there must be tidiness, there must be uh, sanitary measures, public sanitary measures. I recall when I was a young person many years ago, you had sanitary inspectors who would come into your house and inspect every vase with flowers, and check your yard, and they would issue an instruction that you had to get rid of old tin cans and get rid of old car tires and in the yard. So cleanliness was essential in controlling mosquitoes. We did it 50 years ago. We nearly eradicated malaria, and we have to return to those old practices in which every single household had to contribute to creating this sanitary environment. The reckless use of or the reckless, use of the environment in the hinterlands, one matter, in the timber areas, in the mining areas, but also the household areas could be dangerous because they generate receptacles through solid waste where these mosquitoes go to breed. Um, when we talk about, vector-borne diseases, yes, we can blame the Ministry of Public Health. Well, we changed the name to the Ministry of Public Health, the APNU, AFC, the PPP changed it back to the Ministry of Health. But we call it the Ministry of Public Health because the health of the public is what is important. And if you look at all the literature, when you speak of vector-borne diseases, they use the expression public health. And that is where our focus is, or was, that is public health. And it is the Ministry of Public Health which has the responsibility under the Public Health Act to ensure and to deliver and to oversee the delivery of public health care throughout the country. And they must make sure that health services are accessible to all, not just this region or that region, but to all. That they're acceptable, they're affordable, and they are appropriate. So those are the four A's of delivery of health services. They're accessible, So they're within reach of every citizen. They're acceptable, they're affordable, they don't put a financial strain on households, and they're appropriate. That is, they do what they're supposed to do. That is to save us from disease. The APNUFC administration, and I'm proud of our record, we did rename the Ministry of Health the Ministry of Public Health because we emphasize public health as the focus of our health policy. We did open the infectious disease hospital at Lilindale in July. I noticed the other day some newspapers were claiming that the PPP Civic opened it in September. Well, no, we opened it in July. That's a historical fact. They can't change history. AP and UFC opened the infectious disease hospital at Lilindale. And that hospital was aimed at prevention of disease and the control of certain types of diseases. And is also the National Public Health Reference Laboratory. So you see the word public health, the expression public health was not a whimsical invention. National Public Health Laboratory is a part of the government, and that is responsible for ensuring that there's proper diagnosis and prognosis. We have to do research to know where these viruses are coming from, what type of viruses, so we can treat them properly. And we were part of the campaign called Little Mosquito, Big Problem. You must remember that expression, Little Mosquito, Big Problem. And we campaigned for increasing knowledge about malaria transmission and the symptoms and encouraging testing. Again, the days when people go to and from the hinterland, soldiers and miners and civil servants, they had to do tests at the airport to ensure that their blood was free of the parasites so that they could be properly treated. When I attended a Commonwealth Conference in London in 2016, I also attended on the side something called a Malaria Summit. Again, you may not find that in the news nowadays. In April 2016, I attended the Malaria Summit in London, and I proposed then a 4-point international approach. Well, of course, I was concerned about Ghana, but I was also concerned about my neighbors, Brazil, Suriname, and Venezuela. And we have to have a common approach to tackling disease. And the 4 prongs, if you can call it that, of that approach were protecting citizens against the spread of disease, and we needed to apply new technologies in that protection. It's not something that Dr. Giglioli could use in the 1940s. You have to keep up to date. Secondly, we have to prevent and limit vector-borne infections by ensuring that people know, people are informed, particularly people in the most vulnerable regions, region 1, 7, 8, and 9 in the hinterland, to ensure that their households and their communities do not harbor those mosquitoes. We also needed to provide improved tools for diagnosis, and this is what is necessary. There has to be rigorous testing, and the National Hospital, the Public Health Reference Laboratory, has a very important role to play. We must make sure that the staff of that laboratory and the equipment of that laboratory is always up to date, because we're talking about killer diseases here. We're not talking about, minor infection. These are killer diseases. And we must procure high quality malaria treatment, combination treatment of malaria drugs to ensure that there's a full cure of persons who are affected. And unfortunately, the viruses could become, or people could become drug resistant. Sometimes when you take a drug in excess or take it repeatedly, it can, your body could resist the effects. And Guyana has also contributed or participated to international initiatives. The Amazon Malaria Initiative, very important. A seven-country, because I told you Guyana's record in the region is not a brilliant one. A seven-country regional program started long time ago in 2001, 22 years ago, aimed at controlling malaria in the Amazon basin. This is a hotbed, and a lot of the infections come into Guyana through Brazil. And AMI supported a national vector control assessment program in Guyana. It's over now, but we need to restart it. Then there's a global program to eliminate lymphatic filariae, and this was established by WHO. PAHO and WHO are major contributors, major participants in the control of disease and in promoting our public health. So we're not alone. We're not alone, but at the same time, we must ensure that we have international partners who could play a role, because those partners and that partnership is not just at a high level for the head of state and ministers. It is also important to understand that those partnerships have an impact down through the region, down through the municipalities, down through the neighborhoods, and into every household. My friends, where do we go from here? We're dealing with dangerous diseases, and dangerous diseases require dangerous remedies. We can't be laid back. We can't be casual about disease, especially vector-borne diseases. We can reduce, I'm not saying we can eliminate it in our lifetime, but we can reduce vector-borne disease. One is that there must be more education. Citizens must be aware through programs like this, the public interest. And in the hinterland, they must be educated through radio and television programs, through the social media, about controlling vectors and eliminating vectors from their communities, so that they can play, every citizen, every school, every club, every municipality can play its part to eliminate breeding areas. And in some cases, you have to use nets, you have to use mosquito repellents, but always you have to remain vigilant. Secondly, the environment. We have put out the Green State Development Strategy. It is not the same as the LCDS. I'm not going to quarrel about whether the LCDS is superior to the Green State. What I know is the Green State Development Strategy, which was promulgated by the APNUFC. It was a whole of country approach. We're not just looking to get money from the donors. We're looking at making the country safer. And unless, when we take it as a whole, the government ensures that the entire country is protected, that the environmental practices, we stop cutting down our mangroves, we create what is called a corps of wardens to go into mining areas, to go into forestry areas, to prevent young people from dying and to prevent disease from spreading. Work with the ministry and through the Ministry of Natural Resources to remove or reduce the breeding sites of mosquitoes, which cause vector-borne diseases. This is serious. This is serious. This is not a sideshow. This is central to the lives and livelihood of our people. We must continue to collaborate with international agencies and organizations. And we must put our soldiers and our policemen on the borders to ensure that the entry of migrants or travelers, especially from Venezuela, that those movements are monitored continuously day and night. Central government must collaborate with regional administration, must have been collaborate with municipalities. And under the APNUFC, we created 4 municipalities in those very regions. At Region 1, we created the municipality of Mabaruma. It now has its own town council. In Region 7, we created the municipality of Bartica, which has its own town council. In Region 8, we created a municipality at Madia, the town of Madia, and Region 9, we created a municipality in Lethem. So for the first time, we have town councils which can look after the public health of their citizens. No longer could you see Bartica with a little village council running a region that is bigger than the Netherlands. So people were empowered, and this is what we achieved. And those, there must be collaboration between central, regional, and municipal administration. And we must continue to collaborate with the PAHO and other international organizations. We must build capacity to make sure that we address vector-borne diseases by better surveillance, especially through the Public Health Reference Laboratory and the National Infectious Disease Hospital. My friends, the mosquito, small and simple as it looks, is the deadliest animal on earth. It kills Guyanese. We can collaborate to prevent vector-borne diseases. We can collaborate to ensure that our children, Guyanese children, grow up to enjoy a good life in the country of their birth, free from disease caused by mosquitoes. Thank you, and may God bless you and every Guyanese.
Each man must do